Hopefully this comes through. This video is going to be about doing establishing peer reviews in Canvas through an assignment. So if you've never used the peer review function in Canvas, it's pretty neat. It allows you to distribute either randomly or manually, and so that can be a nice function so that you've got flexibility in how you use it, and there are a couple functions. So I'm going to do my best to give the simple version of this, but I'll just show you some of the ways I use it. First, if you'll notice, one of the things, because this is crafted for an online environment, one of the things I try to do is not overwhelm students with too much information all at once. And so my project 2 here, the final polish, they've gotten bits and pieces along the way, or they've gotten a video about it. But when it comes to kind of the final picture of these things, I am building this in a way that's just, here's what you're doing, here's the word count, here's the resource count, here's the basics. And if you aren't sure, go find these other resources that might help you understand how the writing is going to be assessed and all that fun stuff. So that is less about peer review. But the first step is, if you're building an assignment, you have to go in and you have to go to edit the assignment. And because I've got this kind of shortened window, it's kind of funny. But one thing one thing I did a couple times is I mixed up the box for submitting and the box for peer editing, so make sure you don't do that when it comes to deadlines and due dates and that sort of thing. So let's just look. So you have to scroll past the normal due date, however you usually do that. Scroll down, you can click the checkbox that says require peer reviews. As you do that, if you manually assign peer reviews, that means you're going through and clicking, this person gets this student, this person gets this student, like one by one by one by one by one. If you're really particular, or you're trying to make sure that there's a meaningful pairing, and you're like, these are my 2 students who are going to grow the most, because one's really great at sentence level, one's really great at paragraph, and then this third person is an idea generator, so I'm going to put those in this special group this one time to give each other that special feedback. You could do that. It's a lot of work. If you're just getting started, I don't suggest it. What I usually do is I use the automatically assign peer reviews function, and that tends to distribute all student essays fairly evenly. So if I tell it to distribute 4 to each student, there are some times when when everybody gets 4, and then 1 or 2 or 3 students get 5, to make sure that it's all end up getting their paper read by 5 people instead of 4 people. Sometimes that can happen depending on the specific number of the class. Or if it's 2 or if it's 3, it'll distribute that number of essays to an individual student. So then I can assign a review date when that is supposed to be due, and it'll still come up in the Canvas to-dos like a normal assignment, as far as I know, as far as I've seen it. So if that doesn't work, feel free to tell me, but I'm fairly confident I've seen it do that. I usually also have a separate submission for the peer reviews, but I'm not going to go into that complex of a thing here just yet. You can make the peer reviews show up anonymously, which means when a student goes to comment on another student's piece of writing, if they're they comment the same way an instructor would, and so it'll show up on that side screen over here on the right, usually of the essay in SpeedGrader, and their comments will show up there, and it just won't have their name. If you don't click this, they can see the person's name, and you might have to talk. You could, for different pedagogical reasons, have that be really beneficial. If you have talked about audience and complex audience, maybe having, and if you've worked through meaningful peer feedback, maybe having them know who the person is that's reviewing them, it can put a good kind of pressure on the reviewer to make sure they say things in a way that doesn't sound like a jerk. If you're not sure, you can go check out my video on Don't Be a Jerk or the Rice paragraph. Either one of those might be helpful and you can give those to students. You're welcome to. That's what they're for. Or having it anonymous can be seen as a way to free up students to say what they need to say, in the words of that pop guy, pop music guy. So I'm easily distracted. But either of those are options. You decide. I usually go anonymous especially if they're newer writers or they haven't done as much peer review before, because it just gives them the freedom to focus on things. I still will talk about things like Rice paragraph, where anytime you're giving feedback, you start with relationship, then information, and that kind of cushions. It's built on the Rogerian model, and that kind of cushions the claim and then the explanation of the claim. And so I've got a whole example of, does this vest make me look fat? And how do you respond to that? You can't just jump in and say, of course, Greg, that, that's not usually how that's done. Even if it's true, anyone wearing a vest 2 sizes too small could still have issues. Neither here nor there. So that's the basic function. You can set the due date for those. Again, don't get it mixed up with the due date for the assignment, because that's usually where I mess up personally. Cool. So I'm going to cancel the change on that, and I'll show you what this looks like here. So then this goes, and because this course is already closed, and I also, for FERPA reasons, I don't want to show you all the students who are enrolled in it. I can't show you some of the functionality. If you go in here, you'll see a list of student names. You can either set a date for the system to automatically distribute, or you can come in and set the number of reviewers to whatever you want, based on where you're at with the course and what you think students can handle. You can even make this a full assignment depending on what you ask students to do with that essay. So this is another technique that you can use if you are trying to figure out what to do with a 3rd project, or trying to figure out what to do with a 4th project. You could have the whole project be a deep critical response to somebody else's essay, like they're doing a rhetorical analysis of another student's paper. Starting to get a little windy here, so hopefully you'll still be able to hear me. So with that, when this shows up, you would assign the peer reviews. You'll see a student name, and then there's often the names of the other students' papers linked below. And there's also a drop-down box. If you click it, you can assign that student any other student in the class that they don't already have assigned. So you can go back and use the automatic assign reviews, where it's distributed randomly by the system, and you can go and do some manual tweaking. And I've done that sometimes if I go and I look and I kind of see that one student has like all of his or her friends as the reviewers, or one student and all the students at the kind of the same level. I'll mix it up a little bit before, kind of quickly before they've had time to really check it. So those are some ways to use the peer review function in Canvas, and some of just the simple logistics of it. You can assign points to it by putting it in as a separate assignment. Oh, there is one other function I do want to talk about. If you know how to use rubrics in Canvas, CTLA has a bunch of resources. You can probably find this online in some of those on how to use rubrics. But if you put a rubric in for that assignment, the students then can use that rubric as an assessment tool. So if you're someone who usually does, everybody else uses something different. It's like if you have a category that says, how APA format, scale of 1 to 10, how did they do it? Did they do it well? Grammar and mechanics, which I usually pull apart because those really are 2 different things, but I don't want to have that argument with anybody right now. But that's a category. Tone and voice, also sometimes 2 different things, and how do you measure it? But still, whatever categories you're giving students, argument, thesis, whatever it is, whatever the category is, structure, organization, whatever you call it, whatever your categories are, you can build a rubric. You can build out the categories so that the point system's explained. Depends on how much you want to put into that, or you can just give them something you already use as a link and then say, go click the different value buttons or put in a score. So you can tie the peer review function with the rubric function in Canvas, and that can be a fun way to let students do quick number feedback, as well as commentary, a few comments on the sidebar of Canvas. One thing to be aware of is, just like with you, it can be a meaningful conversation, especially from a writing technology standpoint, to talk through with students that the file that's uploaded to Canvas by their peer may have to be viewed in Canvas. If they download it and they don't have the right program, sometimes the writer it will change the format from what the writer originally intended. And so just keeping that in mind, that can actually be a really meaningful conversation about technologies too. But if there's not room in that for your course, you can also just kind of let it roll and hope for the best. But it's a way to use peer review. It's a way to use rubrics and get students engaged in back and forth with polished products. Alternatively, some people just want, say, post your essay to a discussion forum and give 3 other people feedback. Like you may have seen in my other video, some people will just do it that way. This way it's more anonymous and that sort of thing. So have fun with it. If it's at all helpful, enjoy. And the weather is beautiful out, so enjoy your beautiful blue sky and green trees if you've got them.